So Francesca, let me welcome you to Egypt up front. It's almost 20 days or less, then inshallah they're going to see you in Egypt. And I guess this is your first business encounter in Egypt. Am I
That's
correct?
exactly right. Yeah, I've not been there before, so I'm very excited to come.
Even not on leisure or tourism. You
I
never
have
visit.
not been there. No.
Interesting. And what are your expectations about Egypt? What do you expect?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I have traveled quite a bit in the Middle East. And in
Mhm.
the Middle East, often I had executives that were part of businesses in Egypt. And so what I remember is a lot of warmth and a lot of smart. So I think I expect really great, powerful comments, interesting discussions where we get to learn about each other, but also about the business in the context you're in, and warmth and friendliness. So those are my expectations based on my previous experience with a little bit of this.
Well, you just hit the bullseye on that. Warmth is one thing I can really confirm always on us as community and Egyptians, especially with foreigners, regardless of where they are from. And you can see if you check TikTok or Instagram about how foreigners are being treated here in Egypt. And the cool videos I see there when a foreigner doesn't look like foreigner, and then after he purchased some product or a service from the street, like food or something, and the seller or the shop owner discovers he's foreigner, he just pays him back. He doesn't want to, and he give him extra food because, welcome to Egypt. That's it. So I hope you find that on the business tiers we're going to meet, inshallah.
Wonderful. And really great comments, since a lot of my training involves discussions where maybe we look at a case study of a different leader of different organizations, and then we get to analyze it and take it apart. And then we reflect on ourselves as leaders and a part of a business. And I remember just really insightful, great comments. So I think it's both the warmth, but also the smarts.
You're gonna see that. Yeah, we have been living on this earth as Egyptians for more than 7,000 years. So when it comes to hustling and smart, I think we have something there to offer. All right. So one of your books and your podcast earlier, you said that the future rewards the most adaptable leader, not the most experienced nor the most professional. That's not norm. Previously, the future was owned by the most experienced leader, right? Or the most smart. But you're saying adaptability. What changed? Why do you think so?
There is a lot of uncertainty, and it's coming from many different sources. In tech, with the disruption of AI, we also see a lot of geopolitical uncertainty. And so when I think about the conversations that I'm having in leaders across different businesses, the word that comes up probably most often is a version of uncertainty, ambiguity, turbulence. And the answer to that is, we know that as humans, we have a hard time dealing with uncertainty. And so what we could do more of is embrace mindsets that allow us to be more adaptable, and behavior that allow us to navigate that uncertainty with more groundedness, if I could speak to that word. And so I see adaptability as a really important skill and as a really important mindset as we want to navigate from now on. I look ahead, and again, not just me, but I talk to a lot of smart individuals like you, and what we see ahead is more uncertainty rather than less. And so adaptability seems critical as a skill and mindset to embrace.
So is it safe that I would say that a less experienced leader, but very adaptable, would take over a very experienced leader, but not that adaptable? This is what you're telling us right now?
Yeah, I think that that's a good tension and difference to think through. I often mention a really old study. It might seem a little bit out of the left field, but it's worth mentioning. It comes from 1992. And it was done on different groups of Stanford students, so incredibly smart at what they do. And the scenario was very simple. So the students were asked, let's imagine that you worked really, really hard for an entire semester, and now you have an opportunity to buy a vacation package to Hawaii. And you know that your work paid off because you passed the exam that you worked so hard at studying for. And they had three options: buy the vacation, don't buy it, or wait. And when people were told you passed the exam, most of them bought the vacation. So that's the first group. Then there is a second one, and they're told, same scenario, but you didn't pass the exam. And in this case, most people still bought the package. They sort of need a mood lift in light of the poor outcome. But the most interesting group is the third one, and they're told that they're going to discover the outcome of the exam, whether they passed or not, in a couple of days. And in that situation, most people decided to wait. And if you think about it, that's sort of irrational. You just told me that if you pass the exam, you're going to buy the vacation. If you didn't pass the exam, you're going to buy the vacations. But most people have a hard time with uncertainty. And often they decide to just wait. And I think the hope is that the uncertainty is going to get resolved, and then we're going to have better information. But in a lot of the aspects of the world we're in, even if we wait, we're not going to resolve that uncertainty. And so I say that there, of course, experience is always important, but this ability to adapt, to be able to move even with little information, or to learn fast so that you can pivot, I think is just a really critical skill.
Very interesting. And it's shocking when you see human behavior, as you just said, where you're giving the same benefit in case of two options, and people decide to just hold on, just to wait for no obvious reason, rather than being afraid of certainty. So if we're talking about adaptability, would you say this is a skill, a behavior, a trait? How would you define it?
I think of it as a mindset and as a skill. And part of it is that I am a true believer that as individuals, we can always learn and get better as we see the importance of a change. So from a trait perspective, of course, there are people who naturally do better under ambiguity versus not. One of the assessments that I use in my work with executives is the OGAN. There are others, and these are assessments that tell you that given your nature and given the way you're built and wired, you might do better from an adjustment perspective under stress or under a difficult condition as compared to others. But taking that into consideration, so the starting point might be different, we can all do better by shifting to a mindset that allows for more adaptability, and also skills and behavior that allows for that to happen. And so in a sense, it's teachable, it's trainable.
It is teachable and trainable.
That's exactly right.
Very interesting. All right, so adaptability is teachable and trainable. This is interesting. I thought it's some kind of hard-coded inside human traits, that some people are adaptable and some just resist, like fixed mindset versus growth mindsets.
But you are giving a great example. It's a mindset. And so there is an opportunity to shift it towards growth. And part of it is recognizing where you are. And so there are many different exercises or even quick assessments that I often use with executives to say, it's good to know from an awareness perspective what your starting point might be. But then once you have that knowledge, is understanding what it is that you could do to become more adaptable, because you understand the power that that has. Okay. And it is really powerful. Even at the organizational level, there are some really great studies coming out of scholars at Berkeley and Stanford that shows that if you go back to the financial crisis, so we go back to 2008, 9, and 10, there were some studies of tech companies who did better or worse in navigating that uncertain period of time. And what this research found is that the companies who fared better had strong cultures, so people talk the talk, walk the walk, but they also have adaptability as one of the elements of the culture. So it's embedded into what we do, that we gather information and that we learn and we pivot as appropriate.
I agree. And are you going to do some of those exercises that test our adaptability inside that workshop?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are some real good mini simulations or exercises that are very experiential. So you sort of feel how easy or difficult it is for us to pivot or change or move. But then also, once you have the proper toolkit and language, it's much easier to make the change.
I'd be very intrigued to check those tests and exercises. Well, and commenting on the adaptability that you're talking about, um, I think that we as humans were created with adaptability mindset as a survival tool. I don't see how cavemen and later on in terms of human civilization growth would survive without this adaptability. But but till the modern education systems happen, which tries to reframe and patronize and cookie cut place people inside the cookie cutters, that
Mhm.
some I believe it kind of turned down or toned down the adaptability, because instead of you trying to figure out how you want to do stuff, you're trying to figure out the right answer for that exam that fits into the right,
Mm.
QC kind of. What do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, and I think a really valid one. I was recently rereading a book that came up, I think it was published a decade ago, if not more, that is called Just Start. And the
Mhm.
reason I was going back to the book is that one of the arguments is that in a world where there is constant uncertainty, and clearly we are in a moment like that right now, what we should move away from is what we are used to, where the models that we followed are based on the idea that the future is predictable. And that's
Okay.
not the case. And so the arguments of the authors in the book, and it really made me think, is that in a world that is not necessarily predictable when we look at the future, and when there is, in fact, a lot of uncertainty, we should learn from what entrepreneurs do and their way of thinking about their business and what's required of them is to just start and then learn in the process of taking actions and then pivot accordingly. And if you think about it, it seems like a really good framework to think about what's required of us as of now, but it is one that is different from the type of frameworks that we're used to, where what we're trying to do is predict the future and then have established a model that help us execute against something that we can predict with clarity. And so I do think that that use of this type of model where the future is predictable create the type of perspective where we get locked in and we lose some of our ability to adapt.
Interesting. Okay. In the workshop, I think you're gonna use the Apollo 13 and the Thai cave rescue, right? I don't want to give those away, but without talking much about those, what do those crises teach leaders that normal business case cannot?
Great
That-
questions. You might say, wait, this is outside of my business. Why are we even talking about the situations of crisis? I find that it's quite interesting to go to situations that are different from the one that come from our specifics of the business so that we can allow our mind to really understand what happened. And what's good about situations of crisis is that we can learn what happens to leadership in moments of pressure. And so, again, there is a lot of uncertainty in the situations that both crises are about. And we're going to learn what allowed the leaders and the members of the teams involved in those crises to find solutions to the type of problems they were facing. Even if, in one case more than the other, they didn't really face that type of problem in the past. What we're also going to learn is, from a collaboration perspective, how is it that we can come together to face situations of uncertainty in a way that sometimes require more or less orchestration. So we are going to talk about, as leaders, how we can be more agile and what we stand to learn, but also from a collaboration perspective, how do we use that collective wisdom in order to face problems that might be precedented or also unprecedented.
Okay, very interesting. Well, speaking of what leaders need, we talk about adaptability, and now we talk about the collective intelligence, or the how did you put it right now? The
Collective
collective,
wisdom, I often call it.
yeah, the collective wisdom. Um, I think we cannot talk when we talk about leadership. We cannot skip the being the innovation or the
Mhm.
curiosity that is of the innovation. Most of the time when we talk about curiosity, and I believe curiosity is the root cause of innovation. You cannot have innovation without being curious. But curiosity, most of the time, is being talked around about as a soft skill. But
Mhm.
you talk about it as a performance driver.
Yes, in a lot of my work, I think about soft skills as really critical to performance. And I was struck recently in a conversation. I was teaching a case study to a group of executive, and it involved, part of the discussion was around soft skill. And the comment that he made was as follows. He said, what I find interesting is that when I think about soft skills, there is almost never time in the business world, inside of corporations, to talk about soft skills. It's almost either assumed or not looked at. And the realization of this executive is that we would all benefit from being more thoughtful and intentional in the way we think about soft skills and how they can truly serve the foundations of good performance. And so I look at curiosity exactly like that. We shouldn't assume that people come in curious and stay curious, because that's not what the evidence suggests. Curiosity is easy to put to bed or lower,
Yeah,
um,
we can
because we
damp it.
do things the way we do in business. And so there aren't a lot of times to stay curious. So people are busy, and so curiosity gets reduced. And so how is it that we can show that we value it? We can show as leader that we model it, and we create the space for it to come out in a way that benefits our innovations or benefits our performance.
I like that. And actually, I never thought of this angle when we talk about, with leaders, as how curious you are, or how much curiosity you foster in the culture. Because
Mhm.
most of the time, when businesses are small and they grow, the more the number of employees are added up, the more systems you need to put into place, and the more hierarchy and the more constraints. And that, by definition, constrain curiosity, because when you look at kids, the most curious creatures on earth, they just do whatever they come at their minds, right?
Yeah.
Having systems in place kind of shock curiosity, and great companies that people look up to, like Apple in the times of Steve Jobs and Google when they started, they managed to maintain a free ecosystem where people can get curious and do mistakes as well.
Yeah. When I think about innovations, one of the pieces of work that comes to mind for me, and it's a remarkably good HBR article by Gary Pisano, who used to be a colleague of mine at Harvard Business School. And he wrote about the truth about innovative cultures. And what he points out to is that when we think about innovations, we have the usual suspects. We think about the importance of experimentation, the importance of psychological safety, the importance of collaboration, the sense of feeling empowered and being on equal footing, and also being in a place where failure is tolerated. And so that's all good. But what he points out to is that when you actually look at innovative cultures, those elements are there, but there are also elements that keep those in balance. So yes, a psychological safety, but there is also candor. Yes to
Mhm.
experimentation, but there is also discipline. Sure, there is a sense of empowerment, but there is also strong leadership. Yes to collaboration, but there is also individual accountability. And yes to tolerance for failures, but there is also intolerance for incompetence. And to me, that is such an eye opener, because going back to what we were just suggesting, yes, you need the curiosity, you need the experimentations, but you also need a lot of discipline. And it's not either or, but it truly is both. And for
Balance.
many teams, for many organizations, those feel intention.
I like that. I've never seen those as opposing each other. It's
Mm,
always some side of it. One side is implemented, and people talk highly of the other one, or regardless of where they are. If they have this, they highly talk about that. If they have that, they highly talk about
right.
this, but
Yeah.
never this and that, this and that. I like that. Wow.
Yeah.
Promise me you're gonna touch base on that on the workshop. I really like this experience.
Absolutely. And what is interesting is that, as you said, it's easier to be on one side or the other. It's more difficult to navigate both, knowing that both are important. And so part of what we're going to be talking about is how do we do that effectively, and have a culture that in fact reflects those tensions.
Wow, I love that. Right. Let's move to the hard times. You talk about ambiguity and uncertainty, and which leads all these stuff leads to hard times. And we as human again take our most bad decisions usually aside of leaders under stress and under pressure. I've been hard time going through some hard time, so this is why I did this mistake. So when leaders take their worst decisions under pressure, what's the most common cognitive trap at the C-suite level, and how do you train people out of it?
So what I see a lot of is these natural tendencies in moments that are challenging to forget about the role that we play as leaders. And it's hard, but most people, most humans, in moments that are challenging, go to a level of energy that is not very constructive. They blame, they feel in a moment of paralysis, even because it's difficult to understand which information to use to move forward. And what's really helpful in those moments is asking a very simple question, which is, does this type of outlook or even energy serve me? And the reality of it is that the answer is often no. And
Hmm.
so, despite the fact that things might be difficult, it's important to think about how is it that we can move forward with the information that we have, and how is it that we can embrace that type of mindset of learning as we move, and think about the opportunity that these difficult moments offer. And especially when thinking about C-suite type leaders, that awareness is important to them, and it offers the realizations that are also influencing others who are very much looking at them for answers in moments that are highly uncertain. So I would say that it's good in those moments to remind ourselves of the role that we play,
Hmm.
and it's okay to not show overconfidence if, in fact, we don't have the answers for some of the things that are important to the business. Just acknowledge that that is the case, and give people a little bit more context so that they have an opportunity to understand where we're coming from and work with us in trying to move forward in a way that makes sense.
Perfect. I think I just fall in love with the workshop. I can't hold myself on the seat right now. Very interesting. Okay, so again, extending the hard time discussions and the uncertainty. You talked about a topic. Usually, when people talk about disagreements, usually in a negative way, but you
Mhm.
talked about productive disagreement. It was like, what are you talking? This like a sweet and sour in the dish? What is that?
What
So,
are you
and
talking all about?
yeah,
I
this and you talked about the Pixar example, right? So why are you
Yeah,
talking?
so
How is how can disagreement be productive disagreement?
I
Okay,
had the pleasure a few years ago to interview the co-founder of Pixar at Capmo. And in the interview, he was describing some of the meetings that they have when they're trying to review films in development and give each other's feedback on the film. And his description was, I would be in these meetings and people would debate things really harshly. And then they would come out and say, oh, that was an amazing discussion. And I
okay,
remember being puzzled by it, exactly having the type of look that you have, because sometimes I'm part of discussions where we're debating things really harshly, and I come out of them and I feel a little bruised. It felt like a personal attack. And I was intrigued by the possibility that you can, in fact, have these really harsh debates that are focused on the problem that you're solving for, always with the mission front and center, that we are trying to solve something that collectively make us better off, such that the disagreements is not a personal attack. And so I spent some time in my work with my colleagues to look at how can we do that. So mindset matters. So not going in with the idea of I'm just going to win these arguments, but be more open-minded about what this is about. We're really trying to collectively solve a problem. And then thinking about the language that we use such that we stay focused on the problem, but we acknowledge that there are in fact different perspectives. And so I think that when I think about examples of great teams and great organizations, they don't shy away from conflict. They have disagreements, but they're in fact able to voice different perspectives so that they inform the decisions. And it's never about Francesca being attached to that perspective. It's Francesca offering a perspective that can help us solve the problem. So yes, they might be hard in the moment, but they're productive because they enhance the type of decisions that we're making.
okay. But I think this requires a different type of maturity and business, not business, I would say a personal stability, so that when Francesca starts, aggressively attacking my perspective, it requires that I should mature enough, safe enough, stable enough that I can see her communication is not a personal attack, as you said, it's not bruises on my face or my arm, rather than the front and center goal is to move forward and have something beneficial to the business.
So yes, but I'm going to give you a different perspective that could be complementary to yours. When I work with teams, what I tend to work on when I want to enhance and create context where there are productive disagreements, before we get to the specific of how do we talk or how do we approach the disagreements, I talk about beliefs, and then I talk about ways of operating as a team. And the beliefs are important because if I go back to the example of Pixar, the underlying beliefs is that we are better off as a team if we, in fact, bring the disagreements to the surface. If we, in fact, have an opportunity to analyze problem from different perspectives. And so I want to ensure that that belief is articulated aloud, and then we align on that belief, because it changes the way we look and experience these agreements. And second is the ways of working. So we are going to be a team that has harsh debates because we believe that they're in service of a better outcome. And so when those two are taken care of, it's easier to be in the room where you are on the receiving side of tough arguments, because you know that people are not attacking you personally. They're trying to serve the mission of making whatever it is that the team is doing better.
Okay, makes sense. It helps us align and have visibility.
Yeah.
Which will bring us to communication. Again, in the hard times we're living at and uncertainty, communication is crucial. But sometimes on those hard times, when you just repeat what you're trying to communicate, it turns to be more just frequent, but we need to be memorable, right?
Mm.
So what makes a message memorable versus just repetition and frequent?
So consistency is important. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of leaders undervalue the power of consistency. So I would say choose your words wisely and choose your messaging wisely, but stay consistent. I keep thinking about the incredible journey of cultural transformation that was led by Satya Nadella and the HR team at Microsoft. They had changed their strategy, but then they wanted to change the culture so that they moved from knowing it all to learning it all. And one of the things that they did, they aligned as a senior leadership team, spent months thinking about what's our messaging, but then they were very consistent. So people say at every town hall, Satya Nadella would repeat the same message over and over again, because the consistency, again, gives the opportunity for everyone to hear the same story over and over again. And then when it comes to actually thinking through the messaging, nuance is necessary, context by context. But I think about depicting a story that allows people to want to get there. So if you think about some of the messaging in moments of difficulty, leaders talk about, if we don't do this, there is going to be a horrible outcome. And instead, I think that people want an idea of a world that is possible, that is positive, and then they want to put their efforts and energy behind it, because it's actually a world or a type of situations that they want to be part of and see. So bring that sense of excitement, be clear in the way you communicate, give them a detailed sense of where we're trying to go, and then be clear on what's required from the team, from the organization, for every single employee in order for us to move there.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. And that what separates just being frequent and repetitive to more of a memorable enough as a leader to communicate it clearly.
Yes. And if there are tough choices to explain, give them the context. I was recently talking to a leader who had a really difficult task where he was consolidating different businesses. And in the process of doing so, he had to go to some employees group and say, your office is closing, and now you have a commute that is 4 times as long as the one that you used to have. And people were upset. They were outraged. They were angry. And he gave them the context. He said, look, the choice that I had was to close your office and letting you go, or close your office and give you the opportunity to work in a different one that sure requires a longer drive, but at least that keeps you with a paycheck. And if you want to find something else, the opportunity to do so. And again, at this point, people can still not like it as an outcome, but they understand and they're appreciative of the decision that has been made. And often I see leaders not giving the context in a way that just leaves people upset.
Wow. And those are times where there are a lot of layoffs, a lot of mergers, a lot of shutdowns. I think this is very important, very important. Give them context and be part of the decision sometimes, and sometimes it's not. But your story here, it makes hell of a difference. If you're just gonna leave me as a management decision, we're closing the office, 4 hours commute, and that's it. It's very, I would say it's respectful. The other thing this guy did is respect. They give him context out of respect. I like that. So, what's your core belief about leadership that has changed, that has completely changed, not just modified, upgraded, or matured? That if there's anything you believed in leadership that was on the extreme side, and then now it's flipped on the other side, what is it? If any.
So I I'm not sure I would call it a core belief, but one of the things that have changed for sure is the appreciation of the work of leadership. And here's what I mean.
Okay.
I look back to a lot of my teaching, and I had taught thousands of executives, many different organizations, and I had a lot of confidence in the framework coming out of the experience of other leaders or situations that are similar in other leaders. And that confidence is still there. It's good to have evidence-based frameworks. But what has changed in my work with leaders is being there for the moment of translation. Since it's often easy to be in front of the room and say, this is the framework, this is what you could be doing when facing a similar situations. But then bringing in more humility in acknowledging how difficult it is in the moments of applications. That I think is what has changed, since often in framework is A or B, or here guidelines A, B, and C, and there are guidelines that keep the context in mind, but not all the elements of it. And so I have been more thoughtful in the way I'm there for support. And so I say, okay, here's the framework. And when you get to apply it, if you need help, reach out.
Mhm.
And I have been humbled by how many of those conversations have happened where people ask for more support in the time they're actually bringing the framework into their work. Because often there is more complexity, or there is political capital that they're thinking about spending as they're taking a decision versus another. And so it's realizing that the work of leadership is critically important in the potential that it has and in the ripple effect, but also the difficulty of it as it happens in the day-to-day.
Wow. This is deep. And again, I think I can relate that to respect. It's
Mm,
more of respecting the others. I was in a panel a week ago with one of the biggest insurance companies, and they asked me about what is more important today for leaders. And they wanted to send me the questions before that, but I didn't want that. I told them just I'd like to freely think, just ask me on the panel, and I'm going to think of it. Each and every one of the questions I've been asked, it just took me like a few seconds to answer, except that question, because a lot of talks and wisdoms floating all over the internet about leadership, but this one it took me like around 30 seconds to think on the panel. I went just silent, and everybody was like, what the hell is he doing? I was really thinking, and my first answer was more respect to the room
mm,
and to the, because
yeah.
most of
And
the leaders,
yeah.
yeah,
It's
respect.
I am thinking about a definition of leadership that I really love, and people say that there are multiple attributions, but where I read it and first really thought hard about it is in the work of Anne Morris and Francis Fry, and what uh, they say is that leadership is about creating the conditions so that people thrive as a result of your presence, so that it lasts into your absence. I
I
love it.
love
I
I,
think it's a great definition of leadership. I think it captures my feeling of it. But then when you sit with it, think about how hard and challenging it is to put that in practice for many
it's very,
leaders,
it's very
right?
hard. Not that
It's
easy at
very
all.
hard.
Can
It's
you repeat
very
it
hard.
again? Can you repeat again?
Yes, so leadership is about creating the conditions for people to thrive as a result of your presence
Hmm.
so that it lasts into your absence.
I
And
love it.
so I love the clarity of it, but then think about all that is required in order for that to happen.
A lot of
I have met great leaders who are very ambitious, but with that ambitions comes a desire for control. And so it's hard to delegate. You have to let it go for this ability for people to thrive in light of the fact that you're present. You need trust. You need the ability to mentor and coach and support. And then as you think about it lasting after you're gone, you need to think about how to institutionalize what you're doing so that it
it lasts.
just not only depend on you. So it's hard. It's hard work.
Of course. And actually, wow, I love that really definition. And this what makes really leaders as leaders when they go away like 1 year later or 20 years later, and you still hear people talking, guys, I had this manager 20 years ago, that guy or that lady was doing this and that. I still remember those guys. For example, I still remember the very first manager I worked with. It was 1996. And I was lucky having the first manager, that kind of human being. And he was an amazing guy. And I still remember what he taught me, how he gave me space to learn and enabled me. And, years later, like 15, 20 years later, we came in contact. And in Egypt, what I'm about to say is kind of acceptable. And he called me because he had this image about me that I'm a respectful person, I'm a decent, I'm a good guy. And he wanted to offer me an opportunity to propose to one of his nieces as a marriage. And there was, to me, it meant a lot. Yeah, it meant a lot to me. It's like, wow, this manager 15 years ago still remembers me and still respects me. And he trusts me to a level that he was offering that. What about coming over to my house and see how things can go from there? It was amazing. Yeah, unbelievable, right? And I'm still in contact with this guy. I saw on LinkedIn. I think he's quitting his last job, and I saw that everybody from every company that he worked at are just commenting good comments about this guy, and he deserves it. I think this guy fits your criteria. He created the spaces where people thrived and last while he wasn't there.
And I think it's hard in the moment to moment, in the day to day, to remind ourselves of what we are doing, to remind ourselves that you could be that person that 10 years later somebody talked about or talks about as the person who really impacted their work and their approach to work or their own growth. But having that front and center in the challenging moment we're going through, I think it's really important.
I was just asking before the internet disconnected, how much time do you still have with you?
I have, let me see, I think we schedule it. I am good for another 8 minutes.
Okay, cool. So I think I can close with one question.
Yeah.
I do have two, but I can, this is the last one is important about the workshop. But if you, in this changing times, I've read a lot about the VUCA and the BANI terms. Of course, everything is changing, everything is fragile and unexpected, ununderstandable, which makes a lot of sense. But again, businesses and management require certainty when it comes to decisions. But if you are going to introduce a change that you're not quite sure of the results of it, right? How can you do that when management requires certainty and you just want to experiment this change? How can you do that?
So I think we might be in the moment where, in fact, the changes that we are proposing or thinking about or even embracing, we are not entirely sure about the outcome. And so to the extent that is possible, is truly embrace this mindset of continuous learning. And so this idea of starting, and as we pivot, we are going to gain more information that allows us to learn and with that potentially change direction is important. I would also bring in a lot of clarity in terms of where are the areas or the spaces where we can in fact experiment and think about intelligent failures as we experiment to allow for that learning, and where are the parts where the risks are too high and so we just won't allow for that type of learning. And so to me, as I think about this moment, is helping people and support people as they embrace a new set of mindsets and beliefs around the importance of being more flexible. And then I would think about really bringing in clarity around where are the areas where the experimentation is good and in fact expected versus where it's not.
Okay, fair enough, I guess. And closing up on the workshop we're going to have in 3 weeks now. If someone walks out after spending 2 days with you, what's the one thing they will do differently in the next day?
So I believe that they're gonna walk out excited about what they've learned, but also ready to apply the ideas to their work. So I am going to be happiest not only when people felt that they spent the 2 days having fun, feeling engaged, feeling that their head is gaining new tools, but also that they are clear on the commitments they made to themselves for bringing back their tools into their work. And so I think I'm confident that they'll walk away with tools specific to the topic of discussions so that they can reinforce some of the habits that they had, but also experiment with new ones.
Wow. All right. So who should be in that room and who should not be in that room?
People who believe that they
Mhm.
are ready and they have all the tools that they need for the moments we're in right now. Probably there is no appetite for learning, and if you believe that you have it covered, don't
Don't bother.
enroll. But
Yeah.
if you are confident in your experience, but know that this moment requires really effective leadership, then I think that there is a lot to learn, not only from the content that I am going to bring to the program, but also the peers who are going to be there with you, sharing their perspective on interesting case studies as well as experiential simulations that we're going to go through.
Okay. And finally, if you could put one idea from those 2 days into every executive's head, what would it be?
I think the idea is that no matter what your starting point is in terms of your capacity to live in uncertainty, that the mindset and the skills of adaptability are in fact learnable for yourself and then for you to model and nurture them in others around you.
Well, that's it. This is powerful. I am excited to attend. I don't know if someone listened to this discussion and they are not excited. I don't know what can excite them more. But myself here, I am so excited to attend, inshallah, in those 3 weeks. I'm also excited to see and welcome you to Egypt again, and so you can see the smart and the warmth that we talked about in the beginning of our discussion. Francesca,
Same
thank
here.
you. Yeah, thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
Use your time and energy, enthusiasm, knowledge, and looking forward to see you soon, inshallah, in 3 weeks.
Same here. Thank you.
Francesca, goodbye.